This is Loch Lomond.
It's the biggest body of water in Scotland and the UK. By surface area, Loch Ness has the most volume. It sits across the Highland boundary fault line, meaning that the lowlands are down here, but the Highlands are up here. It's probably most famous for a song. But what's the song all about? What else can you do here? And how did a bunch of Vikings, who technically weren't Vikings, manage to raid it with their boats when it's landlocked? Welcome to Scotland Unplugged and the bonny, bonny banks of Loch Lomond.
I fancied a road trip to Loch Lomond, but I wanted to start with a view to give it some context, so I drove to Balmaha on the southeastern shore. Balmaha means the place of St Maha, but when I got there I was confronted with a more modern equivalent.
This is Tom Weir, MBE, a writer, photographer and naturalist. An environmental campaigner. In the 1970s and 80s he had his own TV show, Weir's Way, and in the early 2000s they played it on Scottish television at 1 o'clock in the morning. And I was in my 20s and I moved away to Glasgow and I couldn't sleep at night. I used to watch his programmes. The sight of him bouncing around the countryside with his wee red hat on and just his chilled out manner made everything seem that little bit more okay.
From there you can park in the visitor centre and climb to the top of Conic Hill. Just make sure you give the wildlife enough space. The top's the perfect place to get a decent view of the loch if you don't have time to climb Ben Lomond, which I didn't. From here you can get an idea of the shape of the loch and see some of its 22 islands and 27 islets. 2 of the islands are permanently inhabited, one of them by humans and one of them by wallabies.
The red-necked wallabies were brought here by Fiona Gore, the Countess of Arran, in the 1940s.
But they're probably not the loch's most famous inhabitant.
This is Duck Bay Marina, and my favourite thing about it, apart from the coffee and the jet skiing, is that it was built by the Scots Porridge Oats guy. Jay Scott grew up on Inchmurrin Island, which is just beyond the marina out there in the loch. He was a Highland Games athlete in the 50s and the 60s and he was pretty well known. He married the actress Faye Lenore and later they built this marina in order to give people somewhere to go when they came to Loch Lomond. You can actually find archive interview footage with them, which I recommend you Google because it's very much of its time. There are a few good stories about him, but here are a couple of my favourites. Apparently he turned up to an event and the judges wouldn't let him enter the high jump because he was too late. But they'd left the bar at the winning height. And just to prove the point, he completed the jump himself in his shoes and kilt. Another story has it that he didn't even know he was on the side of the box of porridge until a friend of his saw it in a shop and pointed it out.
A little further up the western shore you'll find somewhere a bit busier.
This is Luss. It was originally called Clachandu, the Dark Village. And these days it's a conservation village. It's even had its own soap opera. Between 1980 and 2003, it was the fictional village of Glendarach in Take the High Road.
You should probably Google that too. You wouldn't believe me if I told you about it.
It gets about 750,000 visitors a year. The touristy highlight is probably the pier, but there's more interesting stuff here than that. Luss dates back to the 6th century when St Kessig brought Christianity to the area. In the 14th century, Robert the Bruce made the area around the church a sanctuary. And then there's this. This is Luss Parish Kirkyard, and this is an 11th century hogback gravestone. Hogback gravestones date back to the Saxons and the Vikings, although seeing as how the Vikings controlled most of the western seaboard of Scotland at that stage, there be Vikings. And in 1263, their Norwegian descendants raided Loch Lomond. I know what you're thinking, Loch Lomond is landlocked, but King Haakon's fleet was anchored off the Isle of Arran. These guys didn't live in fjords, some of them lived in the Western Isles and the Isle of Man and Ireland. They wanted to reassert their grip on the whole area, but Alexander III of Scotland had other ideas. A group of them sailed themselves up Loch Long, which you can just see peeking through behind me. The story goes that they cut down trees and used the logs to roll them across the isthmus, the thin sliver of land where Tarbert is now. Tarbert actually comes from the Gaelic for isthmus, which I can't pronounce properly either. It has been suggested that they probably brought smaller boats with them in their ships, which would have been easier to carry over that piece of land. After all, you don't really need a big boat to raid Loch Lomond. Trust me, I've been in there on the hunt for wallabies.
Now I had another view in mind, and I drove north as the scenery became distinctly more Highland, on the hunt for something a bit unusual. Inveruglis Pyramid has won awards for its architecture, but maybe the view's more impressive when it's open.
There are 31 steps to the top where you can see Ben Lomond, the southernmost of the Munros. You can see the Arachar Alps, and you can ogle the whole lot through the telescope, normally. You can also see what's behind me over here, Loch Sloy Power Station. That is basically a giant water-powered battery. During times of low demand, they use the excess power to pump water from Loch Lomond up to the top in Loch Sloy. During peak demand, it falls back down to the power station at the bottom, juicing up the national grid. And you might think that's cutting-edge technology, but they came up with it in 1936.
After that disappointment, I had to find something to rescue the video.
So, you might be wondering to yourself, where does all that water come from?
The loch has quite a few tributaries, 2 big ones and a load more smaller ones. At the top end you'll find the river Falloch, and most impressively of all, the Falls of Falloch.
You approach the falls through this awesome walkway, to be met with the words of Dorothy Wordsworth from 1803, cut into this piece of Corten steel. I think it's Corten steel. Being at a great height on the mountain, we sat down and heard, as if from the heart of the earth, the sound of torrents ascending out of the long hollow glen, to the eye always motionless, a perfect stillness. The noise of waters did not appear to come this way or that from any particular quarter. It was everywhere, almost. One might say as if exhaled through the whole surface of the green earth. Glen Falloch, Coleridge has since told me, signifies the hidden vale. But William says if we were to name it from our recollections of that time, we should call it the Vale of Awful Sound. Couldn't have put it better myself. This is kind of the perfect time of year to come here because A, it's a little bit quieter, and B, all the leaves are, I was going to say brown, but I might get done for copyright there. But they're falling, and so you can see a little bit better. So what's this song all about? Loch Lomond, or the bonny banks of Loch Lomond, is probably more famous than the loch itself. But the truth is, no one actually knows what it's all about. There's never been a writer attributed to it. The historian Murray Pittock describes it as a Jacobite adaptation of an 18th century erotic song, with the lover dying for his king and taking only the low road of death back to Scotland. In the song there are 2 captured soldiers, one who's to be executed and another who's going to be set free. Oh, you'll take the high road and I'll take the low road, and I'll be in Scotland afore you. The high road is the more standard form of transportation, and the low road is the warrior returning home after death. But me and my true love will never meet again on the bonny, bonny banks of Loch Lomond. The song has been recorded by a lot of people, and it was recently used by Bear McCreary in the soundtrack to Outlander. But round here, there's a more famous version. In 1979, the folk rock band Runrig recorded a version that really stuck. It became a big favourite with the Tartan Army, football fans and rugby fans. And DJs are legally bound to play it at the end of every Scottish wedding. It's a bit like the ancient bylaw that says that James Cosmo has to be in every Scottish film. In fact, if you didn't dance it at your wedding, the chances are you might not legally be married.
Maybe best not to test that in court.